For thousands of years, if you wanted something, you took it. No questions asked. This was the status quo, and with it, great empires rose and fell. After World War II, there was a bit of confusion as to what to do. The US decided there was bound to be a change in how they run things, and decided to bribe nations into joining their global order. This new order, which I'm going to be calling it from now on, provided security, free trade, and wealth, so long as you were pro-capitalist and pro-democracy. This video explains the founding of the order, what it did, what it's doing now, and where it's going. Let's say you're the leader of a country. Your nation just lost a several years long war, and everybody subsequently blames you for it, leaving you to pay $239 billion. You may think that the best way to solve this would be to trade, make agreements, and to earn your money back by general growth of the economy, nation, and populace. And you'd be right, because you're smart and we learned from our history. The failure of running an economy leads to devastating effects on a nation and its people. In the 1920s, by leaving Germany to pay for the reparations of World War I, hyperinflation was brought onto the Reichsmark, to the point where $1 was worth 4 trillion marks. The economic collapse of Germany gave rise to radicals and eventually the prominence of Nazism and World War II. The order was founded out of the necessity to prevent things like this from ever happening again. It began at the Bretton Woods Conference, a meeting of 44 nations in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire in July 1944. The mission was to regulate the international monetary and financial world after the conclusion of World War II. What this resulted in was the foundation of the World Bank, which among other things provided loans and grants to the governments of lesser income nations for the purpose of leading capital projects. America was saying, we will help you make your country rich, so long as you help us fight off communism. And thus it was born. The order, as briefly summarized, opened up trade and security to all parts of the world who were willing to side with the US rather than its communist nemesis. The US had a sizable chunk of the world agreeing to this and got to work. Nearly all of Europe was completely destroyed for some reason, probably having something to do with the bloodiest conflict in human history. With all competitors obliterated by war and the US fairly untouched, America had a tremendous head start in the post-war economic race. Imagine you're running a business out of Brazil. You know that Brazil has an abundance of bauxite that you would like to harvest, so you extract the raw bauxite from the ground. However, you realize that they do not have many processing plants for it. So for very low cost, thanks to the order, you load it onto a boat and ship it to Australia to be processed and refined. Once this is ready to be turned into a product, you sell the aluminum to a Japanese car company, who will turn it into a final product. The metal is shipped to the factory in Japan, and the completed product is created. After this, the product is shipped to a place where demand is high, and you sell all of it, thus opening up markets to the globe and making shipping costs negligible. The greatest beneficiaries of this order wasn't even America, but rather its old foes. Germany and Japan are now global economic powerhouses, each with several trillion-dollar GDPs. This was a result of US-led reconstruction of their economies, governments, and nations in and of itself. The United States slowly shifted from an industry-based economy to a service one.
This is brilliant, but I like this.
Having the now rebuilt nations take up industrial jobs. In just 1 century, the GWP, gross world product, grew by more than 40 times, and in the 20 years since then, it doubled. On top of this, without having to worry about shipping and security, humanity wiped out its most deadly diseases, created lightning-speed communications, conquered the skies and the moon, all under the security and leadership of the United States. Yet the order wasn't meant for today's society, and 30 years after it expired, it's finally beginning to collapse. The global order was not meant to stick around without the Soviet Union. The only plausible outcome that we had considered was total nuclear annihilation. In November 1989, this all changed with the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and the subsequent collapse of America's communist threat. This left America alone, without the only thing that held the order together, a common enemy. The presidents following were not very prominent in global foreign relations, and never facilitated the breakdown of the order in a very smart or orderly fashion. When H.W. Bush was voted out, Americans lost the only president who had a genuine plan of having Americans hold a conversation, talking about the world that we wanted to live in, and what changes were to be made. Following came Clinton, who was focused more on domestic policies ranging from healthcare of Americans to the health of his interns. After Clinton came Bush, who focused on one region, dealing with one issue, and blatant disregard to anything else for 8 years. Obama simply failed to talk to people enough, meeting with his party, Congress, and even his own cabinet less than any other president. Eventually, the election of Donald Trump arrived, and with it the American withdrawal from the global order. Trump believed that the global order is no longer beneficial to the US and no longer fulfills the purpose that it once did, which is true. And the US can completely survive without it. So that's what they did, leaving European nations to deal with their own issues, abandoning NAFTA, and igniting a Cold War with China. Today with Biden, we don't really know where he's going. However, facing so many domestic issues, it's unlikely he'll be very vocal or prominent when it comes to international relations. Yet rising tensions with Russia and China could change this, and potentially lead to some military intervention, which brings us to where we're going from here. With the collapse of the order, naturally comes disorder. Nations will have no choice but to provide their own security on the seas. This leads to more and more isolationism and countries taking what they want for themselves. Sound familiar? The looming disorder can be pinpointed to a specific geographic region on the map. Any viewer can quickly tell these fronts have been home to the deadliest conflicts in human history and are no strangers to being fought over. Viewers will also tell that these regions of the world have experienced the greatest economic growth in the past 7 years under the order of the US. Nations like Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia will have a rough next few decades as the US pulls out, but those are videos for another time. With the US withdrawing from the global order, these nations will see conflicts and raise tensions. Looking to the news today, we are reminded that this order was only temporary, and slowly but surely, our age of nations and peace is reverting back to the age of empires, bigger army diplomacy, and taking what you want. This video was inspired by the book Disunited Nations by Peter Zeihan. If you like my videos and what I talk about, I strongly encourage you to pick up a copy or check out some of his presentations and speeches. I'll leave some of my favorites in the description.